Hello fellow Assault enjoyers. Today I'm going to be dissecting and dissolving squad cohesion in a verbal vat of acid, and you've all got front row seats in the splash zone. This video acts as a supplement to my patch 12 Assault analytical ramblings. It was originally going to be a part of that video, but with how much I despise the current rendition of squad cohesion, I thought it would be best to have a video of its own. From a design, mechanical, thematic and intuitive standpoint, squad cohesion is exceptionally dull and uninspired, especially when compared to comparable class perks and intra-class perks as well. So here we are, another long-form breakdown focused entirely on why I think squad cohesion is appalling and in dire need of a rework, one that better suits Assault's class identity while also properly establishing the evasive learning curve which, in my opinion, Sabre entirely missed an opportunity with. As you would hopefully all know by now, classes in Space Marine 2 have an ability, and once you use that ability you must then wait a certain amount of time before you can use it again. That amount of time is different depending on the class that you play. For example, the Bulwark's banner takes a lot longer to fully recharge than one charge of the Vanguard's Grapnel does. To obtain the numbers for the cooldown timers across classes, I pulled on my boots and I went straight into numerous operations with all of the different classes 3 times over, recorded the footage, and after the fact I sat and watched through them all with a stopwatch active on my phone and recorded the results, of which you can see on the screen now. Now the stopwatch app on my phone recorded the accuracy to fractions of a second, but for simplicity I'm rounding the numbers to the full second, because I don't think in terms of gameplay that you would notice the difference in 40.65 seconds and 40 seconds or 41 seconds. You would between 40 and 41 because you can mentally count that 1 second transpiring. But 40 and 40.6 or 71 and 71.35, I wouldn't say so. And for the sake of simplicity in this video and explaining the sheer mediocrity of squad cohesion, I will continue on the fact that, at least according to my tests, the base ability rate cooldown are as shown. From this, as they are easily divisible, I've come up with a unit of recharge to explain this with a little bit more depth. So as Assault has 41 seconds per jump pack recharge, that would equate to needing 41 units of recharge before maxing out. And as it takes 41 seconds, 41 units over 41 seconds would translate to 1 second equating to 1 unit of recharge. Squad Cohesion is Assault's first team perk, with the effect of increasing the ability recharge rate for all squad members. Currently, the ability recharge rate is equivalent to 1 unit per second. Fractionals and decimal places are there, but for simplicity it's pretty much 1 unit per second. The amount of units required for a full ability recharge varies across classes. The analogy I will use here to help convey this is one of a bucket and water flowing into the bucket. So the size of the bucket will be the total amount of units required. Bulwark would have that largest bucket, whereas the rest of the classes will have smaller buckets, of course, ending with Assault with the smallest. The rate of recharge is therefore the flow of water, how much water is pouring into the bucket per second. that is the 1 unit of water or ability recharge flowing into the bucket. And for the Bulwark's large bucket, that will take 125 units of water or ability recharge, which equates to 125 seconds or 2 minutes, just above 2 minutes. Squad Cohesion increases the flow of water by a marginal amount. It goes from 1 unit per second to 1.15 units per second, which ultimately means a faster rate of recharge overall compared to without, but the difference is quite marginal. It also technically does not decrease or shrink the size of the bucket. The bucket remains the same size, it's just that the flow of water, the amount of units recharge per second, is a little bit more. And when you run this number on the ability cooldowns, roughly speaking, we are looking at what I'm showing on screen now. And I'll put this side by side with the original cooldown timers, and you can see that the differences are quite marginal. Marginal for the Assault and Vanguard classes, as they already have a shorter overall cooldown duration. A 1.15 recharge rate only shaves off about 5 or 6 seconds off the original cooldown timer, which isn't all that much. Of course, the longer the duration of the overall cooldown, the more pronounced the effective save time is. So the Bulwark is receiving the most amount of shaved off seconds, if you will, dropping from 125 to 109, so about 16 seconds of saved time, dropping from 2 minutes and 5 seconds to 1 minute and 49 seconds. And the effective save time decreases in number as we move down the cooldown timers for the other classes. For the assault players who do take this perk outside of leveling, as it's the first team perk to take, they would do so under the assumption that it will speed up the jump pack recharge. And while it does do that, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's nothing substantial whatsoever. 5 to 6 seconds off a cooldown that you still have to wait through, compared to the other class perks that have a lot more uptime and are integrated into general combat flows. And I will be going into some more depth on this quite soon, actually. But there are 2 other team perks, one on the Vanguard and one on the Sniper, that restore ability charge via a proactive action. This means that rather than still having to wait through an entire cooldown to finally realize the save time, with either of these 2 unique team perks, you are proactively allocating blocks of save time per action. But I'll get onto that shortly. Getting back to squad cohesion, viewing it a different way in terms of time saved, I will put that on screen now. And seeing it like that, some of you might still perhaps be swayed by the idea that squad cohesion is still a bit alright. You're saving 16 seconds for the Bulwark putting down its banner, or 12 seconds for the next Auspex to be delivered. But you're still having to wait the full duration minus the time saved. So for the Bulwark, yes, sure, you're not waiting 125 seconds anymore, but you're still having to wait the full 109 seconds. Sniper and Tactical for the full 78 seconds. The Heavy, 57 seconds. Assault moving from about 40 odd to 35. Cool, 5 seconds saved, but you still have to wait the 35 seconds. Squad Cohesion is really just a background, highly passive and also slightly esoteric perk with an effect that only comes into play after you and your teammates have used an ability, effectively just shaving 5 to 20 seconds off a timer that you still have to sit through. Is this amount of saved time that you still have to wait through better than, say, buffed gun strikes or increased extremist terminus damage? Is saving 5 seconds better than 20% additional damage into extremist and terminus targets that hits breakpoints, one-shots, and stripping thirds of terminus HP? Is 5 seconds shaved off a cooldown better than knowledge of the enemy, return on investment in difficulties such as lethal or absolute, where you will be proccing this effect and having a lot of uptime with this team perk due to all of the extremists chucked your way and the potential for 2 terminus or 1 terminus in a boss fight? Is saving 5 seconds better than buffing gunstrike damage by 30%, the assault team perk that has even more uptime than knowledge of the enemy, as parry sticks and dodges are integral to melee engagement and combat flows, not just in lethal and absolute, but across all difficulties? Will the heavy truly appreciate saving 9 seconds, still having to wait a full 57 seconds on their Iron Halo cooldown over dealing with ruthless difficulty and higher warriors or rubric marines with 1 or 2 less gun strikes that they will encounter numerous times over? Will the Bulwark prioritize 16 seconds of less waiting time over killing Terminators and Sorcerers with less swings from his power sword or power axe, especially when they already have a prestige perk that generates ability charge back from blocked range damage at a much faster rate than Squad Cohesion due to a proactive ability restore over the very flat passive increased rate per second charge that you are most likely not going to feel the impact of. Especially visually, as this Bulwark perk, you see the ability charge refilled. You're doing something and being rewarded for it. Is the time saved worth it? Well, you are watching this video, so you probably already know what my answer is. When we look at the Vanguard and also the Sniper, Squad Cohesion really buckles and keels over itself and falls apart. We go back to the buckets and trickles of water analogy. Your base recharge is that steady trickle, 1 unit of recharge every second, but the bucket sizes are different as you go across the classes. Squad Cohesion widens the stream by a very marginal amount, increasing the flow by means which only a magnifying glass can observe. Vanguard and Sniper, on the other hand, are not relying on the base trickle alone. They have team perks which function as direct contributions into that bucket of water itself. Vanguard's Inner Fire restores 15% ability charge per Majoris or higher execution. Sniper's Squad Renewal restores 10% per Minoris or higher headshot kill. And each of these actions is effectively adding blocks of volume into the bucket. That base 1 unit per second is still trickling in, but with each of these actions, let's say you're pouring in additional bits of water into that bucket from elsewhere to help fill it up faster. With Inner Fire, 1 Majoris execution contributes the same 15% that Squad Cohesion passively approximates over time, except with Inner Fire it happens instantly, at the point of proactive action, rather than in the background. That overall 5 seconds save that you still have to wait through, instead rewarded via something the player can do, can actively seek out. Then any other melee executions of warriors or rubric marines or higher enemies is surpassing the time saved from Squad Cohesion. Similarly, with Squad Renewal, a lethal headshot restores 10%, so only 2 headshot kills are needed to surpass the save time of Squad Cohesion, with every additional headshot compounding that advantage even further. If you slap our Bulwark cousin in front of a pack of gaunts with Squad Renewal active, he's going to get the banner back much faster than waiting the full 109 seconds that Squad Cohesion reduces the original cooldown timer for. One system asks nothing of the player and gives very little in return. A marginal increase to the flow of water that trickles into the bucket. The other integrates value directly into the core gameplay loop of shooting, killing, and, well, playing the game, to put it frankly. When viewed in those terms, it is quite difficult to justify the passive increase when more engaging and proactive options not only match it, but quickly and consistently exceed it. And it's also difficult to justify the passive increase when you've got the proactive alternatives Intra build within Assault's class team perks. Knowledge of the enemy and proven efficiency that also have a lot more uptime. You can probably tell that I don't think Squad Cohesion is a good perk by now. Not in its current form. We've looked at the mechanical differences between the Sniper and Vanguard ability restoration via action perks versus the passive assault variation, but the benefits of Inner Fire and Squad Renewal extend beyond the active engagement and quite clearly the advantage of tying ability restoration as a percentage action-based restore over the background passive still have to wait it out version. That benefit is that Inner Fire and Squad Renewal are thematic and they apply the identity of the Vanguard and the Sniper to the rest of the team. The Vanguard, Decimus, is fleet of foot. He dives into warriors as the tip of the spear, knocking them about, mag dumping, chopping them up. His violence manifested as living on the edge, targeting not just the lowly chaff, but zipping towards warriors and rubric marines to make their lives hell. As such, Inner Fire embodies that class identity. You're hunting Majoris and higher enemies and being rewarded for it. The rest of the team is also naturally killing these higher tier threats and being rewarded similar to Inner Fire. There's a burning flame within the Vanguard that engulfs the rest of the team, and each worthy kill swells that flame and rejuvenates you, rewarding you with a faster ability recharge via percentage restores via or through actions rather. In layman, Inner Fire promotes the importance of killing warriors and higher enemies, Majoris and higher enemies rather, and rewards each player with ability recharge. It is thematic for the Vanguard. As for the Sniper, well, snipers and headshots are chalk and cheese, 2 peas in a pod. You're obviously going for the head as a sniper, not just in Space Marine 2, but in any game that has a sniper class or a sniper weapon. Because we've been trained consistently with these long-range weapons to go for the head. So naturally, popping off headshots to gain ability restoration back just fits. And it's what all classes are going to be doing when it comes to ranged engagements. Shooting the enemy's head deals more damage than body shots. Shooting the head of any enemy in any game is going to deal more damage, perhaps cause lethal damage, because game dialogue has always dictated this. And to put this in layman, Squad Renewal promotes proper aiming to the head for more damage and rewards it with ability recharge, thematic to the Sniper class. But the current rendition of Squad Cohesion? So Assault embodies offense, evasion and mobility. Hitting hard, dodging hits, a glass cannon fighting with supreme martial prowess, striking exactly where it will hurt the most, strafing around warrior whips and chaos spawn tentacles and claws. Assault points at the largest enemy in the room and heads straight for it, thunderhammer in hand. Squad Cohesion does not embody that. At a stretch, it would embody the perceived speed that Assault has, but you are still waiting for the full cooldown minus the shaved time. So you're not really embodying the speed, are you? It can't embody offense either, because Vanguard's Inner Fire already takes that mantle. Ranged offense isn't the domain of Assault either, as that's already also taken by Squad Renewal on the Sniper. And you can't include mobility when the mobility is tied to the jump pack, which is tied to the ability charge, which is the focus of this video practically. You can't make this perk recharge 50% faster while running, as that's just daft. So what does that leave us in the three pillars that underpin Assault? We've done mobility, and we've done melee offense. The last one is evasion. The oft forgotten, oft underutilized evasive properties of Assault, already quite convoluted in Assault's class identity as a massive problem all of its own. But it can be remedied, and in one such way is this: tying squad cohesion to proc from the act and art of perfect dodging, and by extension perfect dashing. Bulwark, as the designated tank, begins with a starting perk that increases its base health, and it has class perks that further reinforce it: additional effective health, conditional benefits at lower thresholds, layered survivability that builds upon it. Tactical, centered around ranged combat first, melee second, follows a similar pattern. Its perks directly support its intended function: increased ranged damage, ammunition restoration, and sustained output. Sniper is no different. Headshots form the core of the class, and its perks reflect that emphasis. There's perks which trigger from headshots. Vanguard, Heavy, all of them have a defining starting perk that is built out with some perks in its arsenal. Assault, however, does not follow this pattern. Vespasius' starting perk provides a 50% increase to the dodge window, making perfect dodges a little bit more forgiving across all difficulties. Perfect dodging, however, is not a central part of combat flow. Priority is given first to perfect parries and then to perfect blocks. Dodging occupies a more limited role, primarily reserved for situations where neither of the former options are available. What this translates to in game is the perfect dodge is the recourse for red warning attacks, because dodging is not a choice for these but a requirement. While it is true that perfect dodges can be performed against any and all melee attacks from Majoris or higher enemies, and I tout this as much as I can in my videos, while that it is true, there is little incentive to do so. A successful perfect dodge grants a gun strike, but a perfect parry also grants a gun strike. A better gun strike, because with the perfect parry you apply a damage taken debuff, which increases the effectiveness of the follow-up gun strike. Perfect blocks don't provide a gun strike, but it has its own benefits, numerous advantages, compared to the basic unbuffed by the damage taken debuff gun strike that the perfect dodge provides. Look, perfect dodging is still a functional mechanic, but it's limited, offering a single outcome with no additional depth. As a result, it is used where necessary rather than more liberally, and it can be used more liberally. But what exactly is there in place to reinforce wanting to perfect dodge attacks? There's nothing, and this is an issue at the level of Assault's class design as well. Assault's starting perk enhances a mechanic that is already of limited use, yet there is no corresponding support within the class to encourage its use, unlike the starting perks on all the other classes, which have perks tied to that starting ability or build upon it or shape it in a certain way. You would reasonably expect the Assault's perk tree to perhaps do something similar, but it does not have anything tied to regular perfect dodging. The support is absent. None of the base class perks interact specifically with base perfect dodging. There is at most a partial acknowledgement of this at the prestige perks level. There is the perk Adrenaline Boost that grants knockback resistance on successful defensive actions, so blocks, parries, and perfect dodges. But because it's also proc from parries and blocks, and perfect parries and perfect blocks have tangible benefits that you can see, everyone is far more familiar with and use, it doesn't elevate perfect dodging. It doesn't incentivize or encourage strictly perfect dodging. A fun fact as well, if you've only picked up Space Marine 2 recently, is that this prestige perk adrenaline boost was originally not given to Assault. It was going to be given to the Sniper. The class that handles things at range would get a stagger resist perk for engaging in melee. Thankfully that was caught out by the community, who were just like myself wondering why would the Sniper get this perk and not the Assault, who at the time had no effective knockback resistance at all. The reason I place a lot of emphasis on perfect dodging is twofold. Firstly, Assault's starting perk is tied to a mechanic that is already underutilized relative to its potential, and there is almost nothing within the class perk suite that encourages its use. Outside of adrenaline boost at the prestige level, there are no incentives tied specifically to perfect dodging, which again is the Assault starting perk. There's nothing to encourage players wanting to use this perk, which is part of Assault's evasive properties. There was nothing for you to want to go out of your way to learn it when parries and blocks have clear immediate outcomes. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly for myself to convey, is that this weak foundation has direct consequences for Assault's learning curve in relation to jump pack perfect dashing, so going from dodge to dashing. As established previously, perfect dashing is not a completely separate system, but rather an extension of the perfect dodge mechanic. It has virtually the same timing, the same outcome. It's just executed with the ability button and needing one charge to perform it. Unlike the base perfect dodging mechanic, the perfect dash mechanic is supported with perks such as Commitment, Aerial Grace and Wings of Flame. They all serve to develop and reward usage of the dash, and the increased dodge window of Assault starting perk does carry over into the dash. As an extension of an existing mechanic, the natural progression is there. You would expect to learn perfect dodging first to understand the timings, the windows, the rhythm of incoming attacks, and then apply that knowledge to perfect dashing, adapting only to the change in button input and being comfortable with spending a charge to perform it. That is the intended path. But the path at the very first stage has a weak foundation. I am quite confident in saying that perfect dodging is not used extensively in regular play. Perfect parrying and perfect blocking are. Perfect dodging is primarily reserved for answering red warning attacks, not because you choose to do it, but because it's the only action you can perform to counter it. While you can counter blue warning attacks or unwarned attacks with perfect dodging, there's little reason to, because you can parry or you can block. The player's exposure to perfect dodge timings remains narrow and situational, and that limited exposure carries forward into the dashing side of the equation. If a player's experience with perfect dodging is only ever as a response to attacks with a red warning, then perfect dashing is understood in the same way. It's as a tool for those same situations, but it costs a charge. This leads to two outcomes, I would say. The first is that the perception of dashing is one of limited or negligible use and value, as it appears to only replicate a function that's handled by the regular perfect dodge. The second is that the perk investment tied to dashing is seen as unjustified as well, because why would you allocate the 2 or 3 perks to dashing when a simple dodge would do, if you're only using the dodge or the dash as a counter to red warning attacks? This perception isn't one which comes from a place of mystery or intrigue. It comes from how the mechanic is introduced and reinforced in the game by the developers. There are no perks or rewards or encouragement to use perfect dodging for any and all melee attacks from Majora's or higher enemies. I'll henceforth just say most melee attacks or something like that instead of repeating that all over again. But there are perks for perfect dashing. So the way the class is designed is, rather than pushing players to go on the first step to learn dodging timings first, the design pushes players into the deep end of the pool and dabble directly with dashing, with Wings of Flame coming up as the first dash-related perk. Well, there's also Winged Fury, but that's more dash attack, and this is perfect dashing. So Wings of Flame, first dashing perk, they see that, they try it without learning first the dodge timings to execute the dashes more consistently to begin with, or they use it only thinking that it can be applied to attacks with a red warning instead of using it more liberally and having more uptime with it. Well, not until they're level 25, of course, with commitment. It's still a massive bugbear. And in fact, while we're talking about Wings of Flame and this whole dodge mechanic not being encouraged as much, this is perhaps best encapsulated most directly with the fact that the developers, rather than addressing this issue, rather than reinforcing dodging first, learning to dodge first, and then using those learnings to understand dashing, they just changed the effect of Wings of Flame in an earlier patch to include the whole always counts as a perfect dodge malarkey. Out of what I believed and many others believed at the time, that the dash mechanic was underutilized. Well, it doesn't take genius to see why the dash mechanic was underutilized. If you're only dodging red warning attacks, you would only think you could dash red warning attacks. Why invest perks into a whole mechanic, a whole way of playing, that you incorrectly perceive as having limited use? Which was no fault of your own, remember, because the game doesn't tell you that you can perfect dodge any and all melee attacks and have more uptime with the related perfect dash perks. You're shoved into the deep end of the pool rather than being nurtured down a pathway first. This is reflected consistently in player experiences that I've seen over the 18 odd months playing this game since launch. Over time, the same conclusions emerge. That dashing is unnecessary, that its timing is unreliable, that its associated perks offer limited value, or that the system itself is difficult to understand. These are not isolated misunderstandings. If you go onto Reddit and type in Wings of Flame, or dash builds, etc., you will see plenty of posts about how they don't understand how Wings of Flame works, and that ground pounds are a lot better, or that dashing has very limited value, because you cannot use it as much as you could with parries and blocks and things like that. But these are not isolated misunderstandings. These are outcomes which hopefully you can see is due to a progression path that lacks proper reinforcement at its earliest stage. If the intention is for perfect dashing to serve as an extension of perfect dodging, then the base mechanic must first be established as something worth engaging with. At present, it is not. Without incentives tied specifically to perfect dodging, or even tooltips to say that perfect dodging can be performed against most melee attacks, there is no foundation upon which that progression into dashing can reliably occur. Of course, there are players who make extensive and very effective use of dashing, relying on it far more than on parries or blocks, and watching these videos that you'll see on Reddit or on YouTube with dashing left, right and centre, flanking whips, evading everything. It looks great. The aesthetics of using your jump pack, it's lighting up as you slip past whips or Terminator swings. Better yet, doing that consecutively, back to back to back. It just looks cool. But I would bet a very pretty penny, and this comes from my own personal experience playing with Assault since launch, I would bet and argue that players who can perform consecutive fluid dashing like this did not follow this broken learning path as designed. That level of proficiency to fully utilize jump pack dashes and have higher uptime with wings of flame use first develops from a broader understanding and application of perfect dodging as a recourse not for just red warning attacks but for any and all melee attacks. You have to go drastically out of your way to figure this out. Not just surface level, oh you can jump out of the way of a whip, but learning all of the combos, the timing that's needed, and then getting comfortable with using a full charge to proc a dash and the related perks. The system does function. The dashing and the dodging, it all works. But it only works when the player goes out of their way to learn it, rather than, what should be the case, being guided towards it. The foundation exists, but it's not communicated nor reinforced. And where have we seen this before? Cough cough block weapons. And so those who succeed with it tend to do so in spite of the structure, not because of it. To help fix this, Assault requires at least one mechanism within its class perks that rewards perfect dodging directly and explicitly. Not as a secondary trigger alongside parries and blocks, not crammed into dashing to push players into a deep end, but explicitly focused on the perfect dodging mechanic to reinforce that first stage. Only when that happens can the transition from dodging to dashing become more intuitive, more accessible rather than obscure. Only then can Assault finally have a class perk that reinforces its starting perk and build, properly flesh out that learning curve to have a far more fun time using Assault's evasive capabilities. You know that scene in the trilogy film adaptation of The Hobbit? I think it's the last one or the second last one, where the dwarves and the elves are about to attack each other when the massive worms breach out of the ground and hordes of orcs rush out, the hordes of hell. So the dwarves forget about the rivalry between themselves and the elves, noticing the foes of what is quite literally the evil of the world, and prioritize the fight against them, running to form that defensive walls of shields and spears. That, and then the absolute cinema where the elves hop over the wall fighting in trios, the choreography of gracefully dodging swings, flanking spear thrusts, and then retaliating with ripostes and stabs of their own, each one fighting in unified groups of threes, dodging, retaliating, dodging, retaliating. That is how I envision squad cohesion to be. 3 Astartes looking towards Assault as exemplary of martial prowess, fighting as a unified 3, dodging, strafing. These are verbs under the umbrella of evasion, a category more tightly linked to Assault's class identity than any other. But it's also an action that every class can perform, though it is underutilized compared to its potential. A rework of the squad cohesion team perk should lean into this, shifting away from the flat 15% ability recharge rate, which pales in comparison to the other two in the Assault tree and is the weakest team-based restore versus inner fire and squad renewal, to have an ability or an effect to something like all squad members restore X% ability charge by performing perfect dodges. A 10% recharge would be ideal, 15% would be phenomenal, though 5% would be my compromise. This change would allow Assault to regain ability charges more effectively by leaning into its strengths, namely its extended dodge window. Bobbing and weaving around Majoris, Extremis and Terminus enemies would be encouraged and incentivized. letting players regain jump pack charges faster by staying in the thick of combat and expressing martial prowess through the act and art of evasion. It would also place some much needed emphasis on perfect dodging as a viable mechanic with near unlimited application within melee engagements. Remember, as it stands, you can perfect dodge most melee attacks, but there's little incentive to do so compared to parrying and blocking. Imagine you are completely out of charges, you've whiffed both of your dash timings, or you've burned all your charges on ground pounds to escape a hairy situation, and now you must wait 41 or so seconds, and you're forced to brawl like your other brothers during that duration while your jump pack recharges. Wouldn't it feel better and more thematic to proactively refill that charge through perfect dodges, the free base action? You'd be kickstarting your thrusters by engaging with a mechanic the Assault starting perk already gestures towards, yet is barely supported anywhere else in its class perks, except that gentle nod towards it in the Prestige perk, Adrenaline Boost. Or let's say you've got one charge left and you really want to use it for a dash, but you're extremely hesitant after whiffing the last one that you tried to do. You had the timings wrong and you just don't have it in you to use the ability button again, for fear of losing both charges and being stuck in a rut. Wouldn't you feel far more confident knowing you could land a handful of perfect dodges to bring the cooldown halfway back before committing? You reduce the risk and you reduce the weight. Better still, since the dash is an extension of the dodge, this version of squad cohesion that I'm proposing would also trigger on a perfect dash, meaning you would regain 5 to 15% of your charge back immediately after a perfect dash. Or with commitment, you could gain a full cycle of charges back to wherever it was left off and also receive 5 to 15% on top. Inner Fire reinforces Vanguard's identity by rewarding Majora's higher melee executions with ability recharge. Similarly, Squad Renewal does that for the sniper, but with accuracy and headshot kills. The current Squad Cohesion, by contrast, lacks that perform X to receive Y loop that is thematically tied to the class that has the team perk for ability restoration. This change to Squad Cohesion that I'm proposing would finally anchor it into something thematically tied to Assault's class identity, the pillar of evasion. The benefits of this rendition is more than just the ability restoration. As this perk is unlocked early in the Assault leveling curve, it would be soon introduced to players leveling Assault for the first time, and they would read in the perk description of the perfect dodging mechanic. It would be the first perk to explicitly reference and activate from perfect dodges, and I want to say it's level 4 or level 5 where this team perk is unlocked. But from level 5 through to level 25, all of those games, the player, having unlocked this first team perk early on, would understand that perfect dodging is an action that they can perform, made easier with the extended window that the starting perk provides. And through all of those games, they are practicing against red warning attacks firstly, most likely, as that's all they can do, but then they realise that it can be done more liberally. It can be done against most melee attacks, though a tooltip here or there would probably make that a lot easier to understand, and it can be done in such a way. But over time, players would learn and internalise dodge timings, the dodge windows, the attack patterns, and they will carry that knowledge into later play and prestiging. So from level 4 or 5 through to 25 in the first prestige, so on and so forth until the last prestige. All of those games, learning, perfecting, practicing their dodge timings against any and all melee attacks from Majoris or higher enemies. And once those timings are familiar, transitioning into dashing becomes far more intuitive as the windows are virtually identical. So rather than in the current rendition, throwing players into the deep end, asking them to spend a charge on a dash without really understanding when or how to use it, this rendition of squad cohesion creates a smoother learning curve. Players first master perfect dodging and then naturally move on to perfect dashing. Of course, other classes would benefit too. This change would encourage everyone to learn perfect dodge timings as a means of gaining an ability charge, offering a more active and engaging form of cooldown management. Let's say we take the tactical. You're playing as Valius and you've dropped your Auspex mid-fight on a group of warriors that were causing quite the grave threat with their Devourers and Venom Cannons, and your team wipes them out. Brilliant. But then a Neurothrope appears with a full mob in tow. You've used your Auspex, and with the current rendition of squad cohesion, and I'm now consciously and acutely aware I'm saying the word rendition quite a lot, so I will try and rephrase it in a different way. But that Auspex is gone, and instead of having to wait the full 78 seconds that the current squad cohesion brings the effective cooldown to, you can actively perfect dodge those incoming mobs, those warriors, during the chaos, flanking, strafing to the side, and gaining back chunks of your Auspex scan faster than you would realise the benefit of waiting a full 78 seconds of to realise the benefit that the current iteration of squad cohesion brings. Or let's say you're playing as the Bulwark. We have a Bulwark on your team. They've just dropped a banner to heal a brother after a long, grueling and arduous battle. And because it's the healing version, it's on a significantly longer cooldown than the original 125 seconds. But what's this? Sirens start blaring. A horde is incoming. Mixed warriors, gaunts, and then the extremist alarm starts ringing. Under the current squad cohesion, you are effectively waiting, and I'm approximating the numbers here, 180 odd seconds, and calling that a win because it's not 200 seconds. You're still having to wait the full 180 seconds to realise the benefit of not having to wait 200 seconds. However, with an action-based system, proactively doing something to get those charges back, you could be in the melee, you would be landing perfect dodges. You know that you can do this to get your charges back, and the more astute Bulwark would realise that they can perfect dodge not just the red ones, but the blue attacks and those without warnings, and refill that banner bucket much faster than waiting 180 seconds until they get it back. That is the real strength here. Much like in a Fire and Squad renewals, an action-based ability restore provides players with something to do, something to actively pursue while in combat, rather than relying on something that's incredibly passive and that they have to just wait for until the cooldown finishes, and wow, you've saved the effective 5 to 20 seconds after waiting that full duration. Wouldn't you much rather have the option to perfect dodge and regain ability recharge instead of just waiting a slightly reduced timer? So this is the part where I wanted to voice my own criticisms about the squad cohesion variant that I'm proposing, changing it from its current boring iteration of a passive background effect to a more proactive ability recharge per action version, much like in a Fire and Squad renewal. Well, except for this first one, I'll get this one out of the way first. This is a real criticism that I had when I developed this idea in its infancy many, many months ago. I was part of a Space Marine 2 community called the Adeptus Cigarettus or something like that, a fun group, and I wonder if they're still about. But anyways, I had proposed changing the flat passive background rate of ability recharge to an action-based one. And the criticism that I received was that perfect dodging is a limited action. It's hard to perform consistently, and therefore it's less accessible than a flat passive bonus, which you don't have to do anything to receive. And look, that is a fair assessment. There's some players who do struggle to perform perfect dodges. But that is also the point of change that I want to address. I wouldn't say that this is a perk that makes things immediately accessible. Instead, it's meant to encourage players to learn the dodge timings and master them through a manner of incentivization. Right now and back then, perfect dodging most melee attacks felt difficult to understand, largely because there was little reason to engage with it other than the attacks with a red warning, as that was your only recourse. Give it a meaningful reward and more players will start attempting it, and some of those who do will stick with it, improve upon it, and begin using it more liberally as part of their core gameplay. Another concern, and now this is my own and the next one will also be my own, but another concern is that this version of squad cohesion that I'm proposing could be abused. For example, you could keep a warrior alive purely to farm their melee attacks with perfect dodges to refill charges. And that possibility will probably become a reality if this does get implemented, because there will always be players who look for ways to optimize or exploit a system. For example, those who spam shield rush to move across the map really fast. But how often do you see a bulwark perform that? How often do you see a tactical or a vanguard use the fencing chainsword to zoom across the map? Much like those two examples and this possibility of farming dodges in such a way, these cases are going to be quite isolated. The natural flow of the game emphasizes killing enemies and moving through engagements efficiently, and deliberately dragging out a fight to farm perfect dodges to restore ability charge runs counter to that flow. This design I've put together for the squad cohesion rework is built around rewarding actions that already sit naturally within combat. Dodging is a part of combat, and yes, it's quite limited for a lot of players to just red warning attacks, but it can be used more liberally, and this perk would help encourage and show that this is possible. But other than that, there's nothing in this design that's asking players to go completely out of their way to learn something new. It's going to be one that's integrated into actions all players are already performing. Just some more so than most, or rather less so than most. You are gaining faster cooldowns by engaging with and proactively fighting what's in front of you, what you are doing already in Space Marine 2 matches. And even if some players do choose to game this system, well, that behaviour already exists elsewhere. So I already provided the example of the movement tech, the shield rush and the fencing chainsword. But going back to ability restoration being abused, we need not look any further than the Bulwark's Prestige perk, which restores ability charge by blocking range damage. Slap that Bulwark in the middle, in front of a pack of Devourers or a Soul Reaper Cannon Terminator or even a group of Termagants, and they will regain that charge without killing anything. They can just stand there and get their charge back. They're not actively killing anything. They are standing idle with their shield held to get those charges back. Would you define this as a misuse? Well, some probably won't, as the description is just gaining 1% ability recharge per blocked range damage. But I would say standing in one spot for 5-10 seconds, just tanking all the hits just to get a banner back, would not be the apt or fully intended application of this Prestige perk. More that it was something to be used while in combat, running into Devourers to attack them, or shielding your brothers from range damage and getting something back for it. Sort of similar with the shield rush, that's used to stagger enemies, but now there's cases of players using it just to get around the map faster. Because look, if there's something in the system that can be misused, it will be. But that doesn't negate its value for the vast majority of players who engage with it as intended. The last criticism that I have is that restoring chunks of ability on Assault could be considered overpowered given how strong the jump pack is when used for dashes and especially ground pounds. But then that's ultimately the purpose of ability restoration perks, isn't it? You take them so you can increase the uptime and let players use their abilities more often. You choose Inner Fire so you can use your ability more often. You choose Squad Renewal so that abilities are just restored faster, to be used more often. The Assaults would already benefit from those perks if they're present in a squad. This idea for the Squad Cohesion rework would simply bring Squad Cohesion in line with that same philosophy. But more than that, building upon that, I am optimistic. I am a dreamer. I believe that having this perk would open up a healthier relationship with the jump pack itself, because right now players have been consistently trained since launch to conserve their charges and use them just for combat actions, just for the ground pounds mostly, and only recently with dashes. With more reliable ways to regain that charge, there's room to use the jump pack more freely, not just for ground pounds, not just for dashes, but for moving around, for repositioning, for ascending terrain. Look, there's still a broader conversation to be had about the jump pack's non-combat utility and charge economy to support it, but this version of Squad Cohesion will at least move things in the right direction in that regard. It would give players a confidence to use their abilities more liberally, knowing they have an active, skill-based way to earn that resource back. I think it would be genuinely beneficial to reward perfect dodging with ability recharge for the entire team. It's not a new idea on my end. I first floated it many months ago, even before the Block Thunderhammer guide that I released and you guys quite enjoyed, but it never really gained much traction at the time. Still, we've seen what a bit of collective noise can do. With enough voices behind it, we managed to get the developers to take notice of the patch 11 dash attack issues. While those concerns still persist in patch 12, namely that the dash attack still feels more like a vehicle for perks than a worthwhile action in its own right for perks to then build upon, it did at least put the problem on the radar. I'm cautiously hopeful that something more meaningful might come out of the dash attack in patch 13. But anyways, with regards to Squad Cohesion, if this is something that you agree with, what I'm touting in this video, the idea of linking it to an action-based ability restore, feel free to upvote and comment on the original idea. I'll also be setting aside some time to refine it in a more polished proposal and share that soon. And of course, if you have your own opinions, whether that's for or against, or you have your own ideas about how Squad Cohesion could be improved, or if you're content with it being the way that it is, then please leave a comment below or contact me via Reddit. I've got my profile there in the description and also on my YouTube profile. As for what's next in terms of videos, well, first I should probably apologise for the delay in getting this one out. Real life has a habit of ramping up when you least expect it, even more so recently as I received a promotion, which is great but comes with a fair bit of travel compared to the mileage I had done last year. That said, this channel is still a creative outlet that I enjoy. I like to make these videos and provide my own analytical ramblings on a lot of subjects to do with Assault. So I'll keep making videos as and when I can. So for what's next, well, I might ease off the heavy editing and script writing for the next video or two. I'll likely circle back to that earlier idea I had about the jump pack ascension tricks, so ways you can use your jump pack on all of the different Tyrannid operations to traverse terrains in ways you might not have known. For example, the many ledges that you can jump over in the generator room in Inferno, or the various ones you can perform on Decapitation. And of course, a couple of suggestions for videos that I do want to follow through on for the delay in this video. Our esteemed Assault brother LJM, who helps me with a lot of the testing in this video and many of my previous videos, he had suggested that I run an operation with the Death Grasp Heroic Parry Power Fist and leaning heavily into parries and gun strikes, which is punishment in itself, as I prefer actually using weapons, melee weapons, in melee engagements, so parries and gun strikes would be quite painful, but this is one which received quite a lot of likes, so I will certainly pursue it. And the next idea would be one from esteemed brother Sturm, where he has suggested that I just go all in on range damage perks for the assault and just fire away with my pistol, in the hopes that he could sway me to justify assault having a primary weapon. Something that I'm not entirely 100% with, but I will give this run a go to see where that viewpoint has come from, and I'm looking forward to it. Anyways, over and out. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you all have a brilliant day slaying filthy Xenos, brothers.